The night Charlotte Reeves torched my grandfather's corn barn, she thought she was just getting rid of an eyesore that ruined her perfect subdivision view. Not picking a fight with me. Ethan Ward, a retired federal judge who used to send entire county commissions to prison and came out of it with one dangerously useful habit. I can smell corruption long before I see smoke. At 5:47 a.m., I was standing in the ruins on my farm in Redwood Hills County, Iowa, boots sinking into hot charcoal, twisted steel still glowing in the embers. The air tasted like burned oak, old corn dust, and diesel, a bitter cocktail that coated my throat, and under the hiss of cooling timber, one thought kept repeating in my head. Granddad, they burned what you built with war-scarred hands. My grandfather, Samuel Ward, came back from Korea with shrapnel in his leg and a Purple Heart they pinned on him in a tent, and in 1952 he raised that barn on 47 acres outside Maple Ford, Iowa. Every beam was Iowa oak he cut himself, every joint tight enough to keep out daylight and winter wind. 70 years later, that barn still smelled like dried corn, pipe smoke, and stubborn survival. I retired out here after losing my wife, Margaret Ward, to cancer at St. Helena Medical Center. I thought I was done with courtrooms. I just wanted tractors, corn, and silence. What I got instead was Cedar Ridge Estates. 800-plus look-alike houses, packed onto quarter-acre lots, orbiting a homeowners association with delusions of royalty, the Cedar Ridge Owners Association, ruled by Charlotte Reeves. Picture 5'5" of sharpened ambition, designer suits, a bleached smile, and a white Mercedes that never saw dirt. Clipboard welded to her hand, heels that hit pavement like a countdown. Her husband, Richard Reeves, ran Reeves Construction Group, the biggest contractor in the county, the one that built most of Cedar Ridge Estates and half the public projects in Redwood Hills County. And right in the middle of their kingdom sat my land, legally protected agricultural property. Samuel had locked in exemptions and mineral rights decades ago, back when HOAs were just a bad idea in some developer's briefcase. On paper, Charlotte Reeves had as much authority over my farm as she did over the moon. No one told her that part. Her first royal visit came on a crisp September morning. I was elbow-deep in my grandfather's old John Deere, diesel coughing behind me, when I heard her heels staccato up my gravel drive. "Mr. Ward," she said, voice like honey over razor wire. "I'm Charlotte Reeves, president of the Cedar Ridge Owners Association. We need to discuss that agricultural structure." She stared at my red barn like it had keyed her car. "That barn was here before Cedar Ridge Estates existed," I told her, wiping grease off my hands. "It's protected agricultural use. Your HOA doesn't cross my fence line." Her smile tightened. "Property values in Cedar Ridge Estates depend on a cohesive aesthetic," she said. "That structure is visible from 20 homes. It's damaging everyone's investment." "I'm sure that's unfortunate," I said, "but the law is very clear. This is a farm. You don't have jurisdiction here." Something in her eyes went flat. The Real Charlotte stepped forward. "There are many creative ways to address problems that threaten our community," she murmured. "I hope you don't force us to explore them." I'd heard that tone from mobsters and mayors alike. It never meant anything good. A week later, creativity showed up in a county truck. Dale Porter, Redwood Hills County Code Enforcement Officer, rolled up looking like a man walking into his own firing squad, clutching a clipboard thick with paper. "Mr. Ward," he stammered, "we've had some anonymous complaints. Noise, dust, rodents, equipment storage, septic concerns, environmental issues. 14 complaints. In 1 week. How many in the last 10 years? I asked. He swallowed. "None." "Who leaned on you, Dale?" He pulled out his phone and showed me a voicemail transcript. "Dale, this is Charlotte Reeves. The Ward situation requires immediate and comprehensive attention. Reeves Construction Group has several county contracts coming up, and we value cooperative officials." She might as well have written blackmail in the subject line. "Dale," I said, "you ever read the Iowa Right to Farm Act?" Blank stare. So I explained how pre-existing farms are shielded from nuisance complaints from later developments, how every issue on his list fell under nuisance, how the law protected me and, by extension, him. "So these complaints are illegal?" he whispered. "I'm saying whoever's pushing you either doesn't know the law or is betting you don't," I replied. "Do your job honestly. Document what's really here, or you end up the fall guy." He let me photograph every page. While he took pictures of my perfectly ordinary barn and tractor, I started building a different kind of file: names, dates, threats, calls. That night, at 8:47 p.m. on the dot, my phone rang. "Mr. Ward." Charlotte's voice crackled through, frost cold now. "I understand you've been undermining legitimate enforcement efforts. I've been documenting your abuse of county resources for personal harassment," I said. "Not quite the same thing. People who insist on being difficult neighbors," she said, "often find their problems multiply exponentially." She hung up. Out the window, my grandfather's barn stood against the dark sky, solid, familiar. For the first time since I retired, I felt that old courtroom anger uncoil in my chest. "All right, Charlotte," I thought. "Let's see how creative you really are." Her next move came 10 days later. A lawsuit filed in Redwood Hills County District Court, Cedar Ridge Owners Association versus Ethan Ward. They demanded demolition of my structurally hazardous agricultural facility and $50,000 for emotional distress and diminished property values. The letterhead read Kensington, Pike and Rowe LLP, a pricey development firm out of Des Moines. I laughed over my cold coffee. The arrogance was almost art. Old habits kicked in. I pulled property records, deed transfers, LLC filings. Over 18 months, a cluster of shell companies had quietly bought every farm within 2 miles of Cedar Ridge Estates. Purchasing agent on nearly every sale: Reeves Land Holdings LLC. Corporate address: the same as Reeves Construction Group. They weren't trying to clean up an eyesore. They were assembling an empire. My 47 acres sat in the dead center. I called my former clerk, now a civil rights attorney in Chicago, Victor Chong. "Victor," I said, "I've got an HOA president using county offices as a personal hit squad. Someone just filed the dumbest nuisance lawsuit I've seen in 30 years. He chuckled. "Judge, tell me there's a paper trail." "Oh," I said, looking at my growing stack, "you have no idea." Within days, Victor had filed a motion to dismiss for lack of standing and a federal countersuit under 42 U.S.C. Section 1983, naming Charlotte, the HOA, and every county official who'd played along. Then I called Special Agent Laura Novak of the FBI, Des Moines Field Office, an old ally from public corruption cases. "Laura," I told her, "we've got pre-existing farmland, a hostile HOA, a construction company buying up every distressed parcel they can force to market. And I'd bet my pension this ends with an accidental fire." She went quiet. "Ethan," she said, "we've been tracking harassment-based land grabs in 6 counties. Elderly farmers, veterans, minority owners pushed to sell, land ending up with the same developers. If your Charlotte Reeves is part of that pattern, this just became federal." Then the accident happened. At 3:17 a.m. the night my world shifted, I woke to the smell of smoke. I reached the window and saw my grandfather's barn already half consumed, flames chewing through the roof, sparks flying into the black sky. The building that had survived blizzards, storms, economic crashes was now a blazing funeral pyre. I didn't scream. I just pulled on boots, walked out into the cold, and watched 70 years of family history collapse, listening to the crackle of burning oak and the distant wail of sirens. By the time the volunteer fire department left, the barn was a smoldering skeleton. I went inside, pulled my security footage. At 2:14 a.m., 3 minutes before the power dropped on my property, a white Mercedes rolled slowly past my fence. My infrared camera caught the plate clean. CDR HOA 1. Charlotte Reeves vanity plate. My first call went to Agent Laura Novak. "Laura," I said, "we've got a heritage agricultural structure, protected by law, and a suspect vehicle on camera minutes before ignition." "I'm on my way," she replied. "Don't touch anything. Don't talk to anyone without an FBI badge." Next I called Victor. "They burned it," I told him. "I don't want a settlement. I want a civil rights case that strips every dollar they made off this scheme." The third call went to Judge Patricia Hart, an old colleague and property law expert. "If someone wanted to force the sale of grandfathered agricultural land," I asked, "where would the trap be?" "In the HOA covenants," she answered. "Some buried clause. Right of first refusal on non-conforming parcels at a discount." So I dug. Buried in Section 47C of Cedar Ridge Estates incorporation documents, between drainage easements and mailbox rules, I found it. The Cedar Ridge Owners Association had first right of refusal on any non-conforming adjacent parcel within a 2-mile radius, at 60% of assessed fair market value, if the owner chose, or was forced, to sell. My land. My grandfather's barn. Their endgame. When Agent Novak arrived with 2 agents and a stack of FBI evidence boxes, my dining room turned into a war room. Outside, smoke still drifted from the ruins. "Ethan," she said, sliding the documents back to me. "This isn't a neighborhood spat. This is organized land fraud, and your burn barn is Exhibit A. They wired my house, my phone, my property. While they built a criminal case, I started talking to neighbors. That's when Marcus Rivera knocked on my door. 'You're the judge with the barn, right?' he asked, clutching a coffee like a shield. 'I'm Marcus Rivera, Lot 28. I just wanted to say thank you for not rolling over. People here are terrified of that woman.' He told me about $80 fines for leaving a basketball hoop out overnight, for $100 threats over chalk drawings, letters about his work truck, damaging aesthetics. 'Have you kept the notices?' I asked. He snorted. 'We could wallpaper the house with them.' Soon the stories poured in. Mrs. Helen Cho, widowed, fined for hanging laundry. Tom Patterson, veteran, cited for parking his motorcycle in his own driveway. Jennifer Walsh, single mom, threatened over a garden gnome that allegedly attracted the wrong element. And then the worst. Marcus again, calling late one night. 'Judge,' he said, 'she cornered my wife at the grocery store. Told her it'd be a shame if my immigration status came under federal review. I've been a citizen for 20 years. Threatening to weaponize immigration against a U.S. citizen for revenge wasn't just ugly. It was a federal crime. Every story went into the file. Every abuse became another nail. When Agent Novak finally called with the words I'd been waiting for, my new barn frame was still just lines on paper. 'Ethan,' she said, 'we've got enough for grand jury indictments. Conspiracy, wire fraud, mail fraud, civil rights violations, arson, obstruction. The U.S. Attorney wants this to end where it began, at the Cedar Ridge Owners Association meeting.' The next monthly meeting turned the Cedar Ridge Community Center into a pressure cooker. The room was built for 200. At least 400 squeezed inside, more watching through the windows, phones already rolling. I walked in at 7 p.m. sharp, carrying Samuel Ward's charred hammer in a clear evidence bag. Agent Laura Novak and her team were scattered in the crowd, looking like ordinary residents having a very interesting night. At the front, Charlotte Reeves sat in her Navy suit, gavel in hand, flanked by County Commissioner Alan Briggs. She tapped the mic. 'Before we begin,' she said, voice trembling just enough, 'I must address the vicious rumors spread by certain individuals who refuse to respect community standards. Your board has always acted in your best.' 'Mrs. Reeves,' I cut in, standing, 'I'd like to respond to that.' 'You'll have your turn during public comment, Mr. Ward.' 'Actually,' Laura said, rising, flipping open her badge, 'he'll speak now. Agent Laura Novak, FBI. This meeting is now part of a federal investigation into corruption and civil rights abuses.' Half the room gasped. The other half started filming. I walked to the front, laid my laptop on the table, and set Samuel's burned hammer on the podium, the dull thud echoing through the room. 'My name is Ethan Ward,' I said. 'I spent 27 years as a federal judge. I retired to this farm to be left alone. Instead, your HOA president and her friends decided to burn my barn, break the law, and steal my land.' Behind me, Agent Novak connected my laptop to the projector. The screen lit up with a web of companies and names. Reeves Land Holdings LLC, Midwest Heritage Partners, Reeves Construction Group, accounts in the names of Charlotte and Richard Reeves, payments to Commissioner Briggs. 'For 3 years,' I continued, 'Charlotte Reeves has used this HOA and county offices to target elderly residents, veterans, and working families, burying them in bogus violations until they sold. The land went to shell companies she secretly controlled. My farm was supposed to be the crown jewel.' Slides flashed, violation letters to Helen Cho, photos of Tom Patterson's motorcycle, notes on Jennifer Walsh's illegal gnome, a transcript of Marcus Rivera's grocery store threat, the burn barn footage with Charlotte's plate visible. 'This is outrageous,' Charlotte shouted. 'He's twisting everything. He's—' I hit play on an audio file. Her voice filled the room, recorded in my wired kitchen. 'We have the ability to make your legal problems disappear. That federal lawsuit. the insurance claims from the fire. All of it can go away if we can reach an understanding. Silence. Pure, heavy silence. Mrs. Reeves, I said softly, you told me there were creative ways to solve community problems. You forgot creative still has to be legal. Agent Novak stepped forward, cuffs in hand. Charlotte Reeves, she said, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, mail and wire fraud, deprivation of rights under color of law, obstruction of justice, and federal arson. The room erupted. Cheers, tears, stunned laughter. Someone yelled, about time. Cameras flashed as Charlotte went from queen to prisoner. Commissioner Briggs tried to slip toward the exit. 2 agents were already there, reading him his rights. 6 months later, I stood where ashes once smoldered and watched volunteers raise the frame of a new barn. Amish carpenters set beams, veterans hauled lumber, kids ran between sawhorses. Charlotte Reeves had taken a plea deal, 12 years in federal prison on racketeering, conspiracy, and civil rights charges. Her restitution, over $2 million, funded legal aid, community projects, and scholarships. Reeves' construction group was blacklisted from county contracts. Commissioner Briggs got 8 years. A dozen smaller players lost their badges, their offices, their illusions. Inside the new barn, a sign hangs over a small office, Ward Rural Justice Center. We've already handled more HOA abuse and small-town corruption cases than I care to count. Turns out there are a lot of Charlottes out there. They all think no one's watching. They're wrong. Every fall, we hold the Samuel Ward Heritage Festival on the farm. Old tractors, kids learning about corn, families from Cedar Ridge estates laughing under the shadow of a barn they helped rebuild. One evening at sunset, my phone buzzed. A message from Tom Harris at the Maple Ford Gazette. Judge, got a tip. HOA president in Cedar Rapids threatening to foreclose on a veteran for flying a non-compliant flag. Want details? I looked at the barn, at the fields, at neighbors who weren't afraid anymore, and I smiled. Send everything. I texted back. Some people never learn. Fortunately, I never really retired. And now I have to ask you, if you'd been sitting in that community center, watching Charlotte Reeves led away in handcuffs after years of terrorizing your neighborhood, would you call that justice, revenge, or finally, balance? When people twist small bits of power, an HOA rulebook, a county office, a judge's signature, into weapons against ordinary families, what do you think real justice should look like? Mercy, punishment, or making them rebuild everything they tried to burn down?